to another episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. Jesus Christ died and he rose again. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay? So, I saw a story. I watched a video on a situation that took place in 2004 involving Mark Cuban and Steve Nash, okay? And it was about Mark Cuban wanting to pay Steve Nash, okay? Okay, so we all knew Nash ended up going to Phoenix in the summer of 2004, okay? And I watched a video, and Steve Nash didn't want to leave Dallas. He had built a great working relationship with Dirk, and not only on the court but off the court as well. Dirk was the one. Steve Nash was the one that Dirk leaned on when Dirk first came to the NBA, and so those two built a bond over the years. And Steve Nash was 30 years old in the summer of 2004. Okay. And so like I said, Steve Nash didn't want to go anywhere. But Phoenix offered him a boatload of money. Okay. Phoenix offered him a boatload of money. Then he went back to Mark Cuban and said, hey, I'm going to give you a chance to match all this money that Phoenix is throwing at me. And Mark Cuban didn't match it. And he ended up signing with his Phoenix, and he wins 2 MVPs. Leaves Phoenix into the Western Conference Finals. Okay, so but Mark Cuban even admitted that letting go of Steve Nash was one of his biggest mistakes that he made. Okay, and so I also saw this article on Basketball Network too. Okay, where Steve Nash said he paid a lot of guys who never came close to living up to their contract. Steve Nash was gutted when Mark Cuban refused to pay him his due. Okay. Steve felt he earned it, and watching others get paid made the decision sting even more. Okay. So the article starts out that the Dallas Mavericks, one of the worst teams in the 1990s, never making the postseason, not once. Correction, they actually made the postseason in 1990. Okay, at the start of the 90s, they made the playoffs. They got swept by the Portland Trail Blazers. Okay, but they did make the playoffs in the decade of the 90s, 1990. Then after that, they didn't make it back for the rest of the decade. Okay, so however, things began to shift when they handed the key to their offense to a Canadian guard named Steve Nash after being named full-time starter. He, along with German superstar Dirk Nowitzki, all-star swinger Michael Finley, drove the team to new heights as they barged into the postseason in 2001, where they upset the Utah Jazz in 5 games. A guy named Calvin Booth scored the game-winning basket. Okay. Nash never looked back after that, becoming an all-star and a member of the All-NBA team in 2 of the next 3 seasons. However, after the Mavs flamed out in 2004, the franchise, particularly Mark Cuban, had a huge decision on his hands. With Nash entering free agency, Cuban had to decide if he was going to match the Phoenix Suns' $63 million offer or let the floppy-haired all-star playmaker walk. History shows that Cuban decided against matching the Suns' offer sheet, something Nash took personally. Another part of the article is titled, Cuban happily wasted money on other players. As critical as the roles of Nash, Nowitzki, and Finley were in elevating the Mavs to contender status in the West, Cuban's purchase of the team in 2000 was also a turning point in the franchise's history. In the brash billionaire, the Mavs finally had an owner who wasn't shy about giving the players the best amenities. I hope I said that word right. And spending a lot of money to get the players they needed. Unfortunately for Nash, despite his achievements, contributions, and impeccable chemistry with Dirk, Cuban didn't think he was a guard who could lead them to the promised land that was only willing to offer a 4-year deal that would pay him $9 million a season. So that's what Mark Cuban was offering. A 4-year deal for $9 million. As Nash told Cuban about the offer the Suns tendered him, the latter said he would speak to Nash's agent and see what they could work out. They never came close to an agreement, and the prolific guard made his deal with the Suns official on July 14th, 2004. Being an NBA veteran meant that Nash understood how NBA teams operated. It was always about the bottom line. However, what got Nash's GOAT was that Cuban didn't hesitate to pay players who didn't come close to what he was capable of. He paid a lot of guys who never came close to living up to their contract, Nash said. Another part of the article is titled wasted a lot of money. It's curious how Cuban could justify paying the likes of Alan Henderson. I didn't even know Alan Henderson got paid. But yeah, according to this article, he wasted money on Alan Henderson and Keith Van Horn, a lot of money for their paltry production. Henderson played 78 games for the Mavs during the 2004-2005 season and averaged 3.5 points per game. Keith Van Horn, meanwhile, was acquired at the trade deadline and averaged 12.2 points per game. That season. However, the following season, his numbers dipped to 9 points per game, a terrible number considering he was paid 15.6 that season. To draw the line on me, a guy who always showed up and worked hard and was a big part of the team's success, it hurt, Nash admitted. Nash more than proved to Cuban he was worth the money he commanded and more, as he was named NBA's MVP on back-to-back seasons, leading the Suns' high-octane offense to new heights and turning them into legitimate title contenders. Okay. Yeah. So Nash won back-to-back MVPs. The Mavericks, ironically, actually defeated the Phoenix Suns on their way to the 2006 NBA Finals. Okay. Yeah. So Steve Nash. Yeah. So Steve Nash leaving the Dallas Mavericks worked out pretty well. It worked out pretty well for Mark Cuban. He made it to the 2006 NBA Finals. Lost to the Miami Heat. But yeah. So I guess Steve Nash is still holding a grudge. Well, maybe he's not, but maybe he is still holding a grudge against the fact that guys like Alan Henderson and Keith Van Horn got paid, and he didn't get paid. And you saw what Nash became in Phoenix. You saw what the Mavericks did in the coming years. 2 NBA Finals appearances, won the NBA title in 2011. So yeah. So yeah. So I think it worked out pretty well for both sides at the end of the day. Um. So I love collecting NBA basketball cards. Okay, and football cards too. Um, and so one of the other things I notice is I always take notice at the players who have basketball cards who no absolutely nobody knows who they are. Okay. Now, so I was looking at the 1989-90 NBA hoops second series. Okay. The second series has the expansion of players like the Orlando Magic, Reggie Theus, Otis Smith, Sidney Green, Moreland Wiley, Terry Catlett, Scott Skiles, Mark Akers. Okay. It also has the trades as well. Okay. Um, Everybody remembers Mr. Mean, Larry Smith. All right. Look who it is. The Admiral, David Robinson. Rookie David Robinson. Before he had the high top fade, I might add. Before David Robinson had the high top fade, okay? Yeah. Um, 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 the man who was traded to Philadelphia for Maurice Cheeks and Christian Welp, um, Johnny Dawkins. Okay, Johnny Dawkins. Um, there goes Johnny right there. The man who came to San Antonio for Alvin Robertson. Okay, Terry Cummings. Okay, there you go. TEC. And most people don't know Terry Cummings could sing too. Terry Cummings was a pretty good singer, as a matter of fact. He cut a as a matter of fact, I think he did like a single. Yeah, Terry Cummings did like a single. Um Terry Cummings can hit it a blow. Yeah. Future NBA head coach Sidney Lowe of the 89-90 expansion team Timberwolves, okay? There you go. There goes Sidney Lowe right there. The first coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Bill Musselman. Okay. All right. There's Bill Musselman right there. The man who came to the Portland Trailblazers in exchange for Sam Bowie that made the Portland Trailblazers championship contenders, Buck Williams. All right. There goes a Buck right there. The man Michael Jordan dunked on and when he was in Utah. Okay, so Carl Malone tells us his story, right? Carl Malone tells his story where Jordan dunked on John Stockton in 1988. Okay, and somebody ran down the sideline and said, "Hey, Jordan, pick on somebody your own side." Supposedly it was Jazz owner Harry Miller at that time. So he came down the floor and he dunked on Mel Turpin, okay? And went over and looked at the guy, and Jordan went over while he was running down the court, went over and looked at the guy and said, was he big enough? Okay? So, which probably explains why Mel Turpin probably played in Spain during the 1989 season, okay? Which probably explains why Mel Turpin played in Spain in 1989, okay? But he came back in 1990 to play for the Washington Bullets. Okay. Yeah. So there goes Mel Turpin right there. Um, Scott Hastings. Oh yeah. Um, Scott Skiles, Orlando Magic. All right. There we go. And Scott Skiles, he actually got into a fight with Shaquille O'Neal at practice. Okay. He actually got into a fight with Shaquille O'Neal at practice in 1994. He took a swing at Shaq, and Shaq punched him back. And Scott Skiles said his neck and his head paid for it for about the next 8 weeks. Okay, so yeah. So the man who came to San Antonio from Philadelphia for Johnny Dawkins, Mo Cheeks. Yeah, Mo Cheeks. All right. There goes Mo Cheeks right there. All right. The thing about it is, Maurice Cheeks didn't spend that long in San Antonio because during the 89-90 season, he was sent to New York for Rod Strickland. Okay, so go figure, right? First coach of the Orlando Magic, Matt Gugas. All right, and there goes Matt right there. Okay. The only member of the original expansion Magic who was on the 1995 team that went to the NBA Finals, Jeff Turner. All right. All right. There goes Jeff right there. So, David Wingate, Steve Johnson, Alton Lister. You remember when I said the Clippers have signed some of the most unrecognizable names in the history of the NBA? Ladies and gentlemen, they signed Ken Bannister during the 1989 season. Okay? Yeah, they signed Ken Bannister during the 1989 season. And there he goes right there. Ken Bannister. All right. Now he actually played for the Clippers late in 89, 1999, 91. Okay. Head coach of the team that took the Rockets to the 86 finals, Bill Fitch, coach of the New Jersey Nets. Okay. There you go, Bill Fitch. Who, by the way, the Nets went 17-65 in 1990. Yeah, so yeah, they were horrible. Former Chicago Bull guard Sam Vincent. All right, there goes Sam Vincent right there. Larry Drew, Rick Mahorn, Christian Wall, Brad Lowhouse. Now, it shows Rick Mahorn in a Pistons uniform, right? It shows Rick Mahorn in a Pistons uniform, okay? So he was an expansion draft choice. Yes, he was. Rick Mahorn was an expansion draft choice, okay? All right. There you go. Right there. Okay. But what happened was, he never reported to Minnesota, okay? And ironically, if you watch that Pistons documentary, John Sally tells the story. There was no Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter to tell you news. So, and ironically, during the Pistons championship celebration they were having at the Palace, after the celebration, Rick Mahorn was told that he was picked up by the Timberwolves in the expansion draft. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Um, all right, hold on. I bought his name up as part of the Johnny Dawkins trade. So there goes Christian Welp right there. Okay. Yeah, there goes Christian Welp. All right. There you go, right there. Um, Frank Johnson. Now, this guy was on the 1993 Suns team that went to the NBA Finals. Frank Johnson. Okay. I know Frank Johnson was picked up by the Orlando Magic, but he never actually played a game with the Orlando Magic, believe it or not. Yeah. All right. Mike Brown, Sam Bowie. The man who came to New Jersey for Buck Williams. Sam Bowie. All right. There it goes. Big Sam right there. All right. Kevin Gamble. There you go. Right there. There you go. Um, Ice Reynolds. Okay. Jerry Ice Reynolds. The expansion Magic. Okay. All right. Mike Sanders. Bill Jones. I don't think anybody has ever heard of a NBA player named Bill Jones before. Okay. Yeah. Neither did I. But that's how I learned about these players. that's who I. That's how I learned about these players who nobody knows. Okay. Bill Jones, right? Ah, Cadillac. Cadillac. There he goes. Greg Anderson. All right. All right. There goes Cadillac right there. All right. Dave Corzine. Michael Williams. All right. Okay. So everybody knows pretty much knows Michael Williams' time with the Pacers and the Timberwolves, okay? But not many people know that he was actually on the Detroit Pistons World Championship team, okay? And he also spent some time as a Phoenix Sun. Yeah, Michael Williams, all right? Yeah, Michael Williams right there, all right? Okay. Jay Vincent, David Rivers, Carl Jones, Brad Sellers. Yeah. Um, the man who came to Milwaukee with Greg Anderson as part of the Terry Cummings trade. Alvin Robertson. Yep. Alvin Robertson. All right. All right. There he goes right there. And well. And lastly, last but not least, who do we have here? Steve Kerr. Okay. Steve Kerr. Yeah. There you go. Steve Kerr. Okay. And see, Scott Roth, Stuart Gray, Dave Corzine, Brad Lohaus, Wayne Cooper, Alton Lister, David Wingate, Jeff Turner. All right. All right, one more. Larry Drew. Okay, Larry Drew. All right, there you go, right there. All right, all right. Yeah, that's it. That's it. That is it. See if I can find that Michael Jordan card. You know what? Forget it. Forget it. Forget it. All right. That's it. That's all for On It Back with Sean Farrell. I am out of here. May God bless you all. Peace.